So we bring these role models that are in our own community and we shine a spotlight on them so that it isn't so strange to see a woman who is a software engineer or an aerospace engineer or doing research science.
Welcome to the Feast Over Famine podcast. On this podcast, we're navigating the tension that we find where mission and profit collide. We're talking to CEOs, founders, executive directors, impact investors, and all of what we've identified as the global ecosystem of the social enterprise, business for transformation, business as mission landscape. We're talking to them about the obstacles they face, the strategic challenges they've been through, how they're funded, how they were started, and everything that's happened in between. We are trying to share their story in a way that's impactful to help us all to grow the social enterprise space for the better. Enjoy this week's episode with your host, Ryan Mahaffey.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Feast Over Famine podcast. Super stoked for today's episode. We've got a longtime client, STEMblazers. Wendy Merchant is the executive director and founder of STEMblazers. And I'm really excited about this episode. We're going to talk about, obviously, the gender gap in STEM careers and what STEMblazers is doing for that. But I think they've used the corporate world as a unique opportunity to create a sustainable organization for themselves. So I'm really excited to dive in on that side of it. And yeah, Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, totally. All right, Wendy. So and this is kind of fun, Wendy, because a lot of the times when we have someone on the podcast, I've met them once or kind of vetted them or, maybe, but not all the time are they a client. And I mean, we've known each other for, I think like 2.5 years now, which is pretty cool. So I feel like we've got a whole history of stuff that we could talk about and learnings and all sorts of things on the episode.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think we've worked together for the last couple of years, so there is definitely some history.
Lots of ups and downs, peaks and valleys for sure. Cool. Well, yeah, Wendy, why don't you kind of kick us off with telling us your story? Because obviously you were a woman in engineering in a STEM career and then left to start STEMblazers and all that. So tell us a little bit about your background, how that caused you to start STEMblazers and what STEMblazers is doing today.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to believe that all of this happened 8 years ago. It feels like yesterday, and it also feels like it's a whole lifetime ago. But as a woman in STEM, I spent 20 years working as a mechanical engineer in the construction industry, designing building systems. And after about 20 years, I decided, I thought, I should probably hit the pause button and decide if this is what I want to continue doing for the next 10 to 20 years, or if there's something else that I can do. And I had no idea what that would be, but I knew I wanted to stay home with my son and really focus on him. He was 10 at the time. And I started looking for opportunities for him. He was very interested in robotics and coding and, that whole STEM realm, and started researching and touring different facilities and noticing that very few, if any, girls were engaging in these programs. And I was kind of shocked, which is funny to me because I was like, why was I so surprised? It looked exactly like the same ratios that from the industry I just came from. But I started doing more research and realizing that engineering in general had pretty much flatlined over the last 30 years. And women had dropped off from computer science since the 90s. And I thought, oh my goodness.
Do you think, Wendy, really quick, do you think part of your expectation on that was just assuming that, how do I say this? So Gen Z, millennials, all that kind of stuff, theoretically, those generations are thinking outside of typical gender roles and outside of the box and things. So was part of your assumption there just well, obviously more girls are getting involved. They've broken down those walls. It's different than maybe when you were in college or when some people later in their career were. Was that part of it? I mean, obviously you were seeing that there, but there's an expectation that was different.
Absolutely. I thought, if I could do this, there was a whole bunch of women right behind me in the pipeline. And I was really surprised when I looked up, turned around, and they weren't there. And I was actually really shocked, especially knowing that there were opportunities that were more attainable for girls, unlike when I was growing up and I was going through school. So yeah, that had a lot to do with it. I thought for sure that more women were going to choose that path, and was really surprised when I did the research and found that wasn't actually the case.
I think that's really important for people to hear, because I think I'm trying to think back to when we met. And again, I was like, wow, such a cool mission. But I had an assumption like a ton of girls in middle school and high school and college were like super interested in that stuff, right. And that there were tons of opportunity. So even I had, and it's not even like a prejudice kind of thing in our brain. It's more of just like, yeah, the world's getting better. So I'm assuming it is better in that sense. But, I think it's important for people to have that takeaway, like, hey, no, there needs to be a lot of work on this front.
Yeah, there's been a lot of awareness around it, and we've talked about it, and I know educators talk about it. But there's a lot of work to still get these ladies thinking about it and actually choosing it and understanding that it is a possibility for them, and also bringing their unique voices, insight, and innovation into a world that's being driven forward in tech, and making sure that our voice is being heard and that products and problems are being solved to, serve not just men, but the entire population.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, cool. So I cut you off there. I thought that was just like a really cool insight and point you had there, but you were talking about how you started touring some facilities and you weren't seeing girls in there, and you're like, wait, this looks like my career and stuff. So kind of continue on with your story from there. Sorry for interrupting. I was just like, wow. Yeah, that is a really interesting point.
Yeah, that was good that we dove into that. Yeah. So once I started looking into these programs and realizing that there weren't a lot of young girls choosing them, I just got really, passionate. And I thought, if I can be an engineer and be successful at it, and I was a good engineer, I've got to figure out how to tell this next generation that they can do it too. I wasn't gifted and talented. I worked for every math grade I ever got. It didn't come easy to me, but once I, went through college and out into the workforce, it all clicked and it all worked together. And I was like, if I can do this, I know these young ladies, these young girls can do this. And so I set out to do some research, and I partnered up with a couple of teachers and launched the very first chapter of STEMblazers at the high school level to start exploring careers in STEM, and had some success and interest with the girls that we were working with. And eventually middle school girls were asking for it. And we ended up where we are right now, 7 years later, in 13 middle schools and 4 high schools.
Which is awesome to see all that growth. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your decision, like where you were at career-wise, because, one of the things I wanted to highlight on this episode was, I guess, 2 things. One being, hey, your guys' organization gives people unique opportunity to a unique social enterprise opportunity to interact with a mission where they're sitting at their job today. Meaning you could be a software engineer at a company in Denver and say, wow, this is a big challenge we're facing. And where you're sitting, you can be a champion within your internal organization to change that, partner with STEMblazers, things like that. There's a lot of times people are like, man, I really hurt for Africa, say, and they're sitting as a software engineer and there's not much they can do. So I think that's just an interesting angle to talk about. And I think your career choice then played into that. And then obviously the corporate donor side of things and how you guys have built those relationships, we'll talk about later, but talk to me about like your career transition in that and what that was like for you.
Yeah. It was, well, I didn't have an idea that I wanted to chart this path when I hit the pause button as an engineer. I stumbled on it. It was all born out of this passion that I had to be able to encourage and build confidence with younger, the younger generation, with middle school and high school girls. So once that kind of ignited in me, I was like, you know what, I love engineering, but this is what I was called to do. And so I need to do this now. And it's definitely a labor of love and a passion. And I would say the career transition wasn't difficult because of those 20 years that I had that experience. I was able to take that and manifest it into something that I could then give back to my community that I had been living and working in. I had my head down for 20 years. And then finally I was like, you know what, now I have something that I can do that will fulfill me in a different way. So the transition wasn't necessarily difficult, but it gave me a lot of insight into how to build that business model, that social enterprise piece with corporate partners, because I came from that world, to be able to bridge that into then taking it into a nonprofit world.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Thanks for sharing that part of it. And we'll talk about the corporate donor piece in a minute. So kind of round out what you guys look like today. You mentioned the chapters you guys are in, but tell me a little more about how you guys programmatically work, or how your theory of change is. Like, you guys are going into schools, middle schools, high schools. Talk about the programs you're doing. And then I know you guys have the alumni program, and you've been around long enough now that you've got some girls who were in the program in high school and have now graduated and are getting jobs. Talk to me a little bit about what you guys are doing programmatically along the way for all those girls.
Sure. So again, we work with middle school and high school girls, and we partner with educators. So our biggest success stories will come when we are partnered with educators and we establish after school enrichment programs, which we call chapters. And we stay with a chapter, we stay with girls for an entire school year. So a lot of extracurricular activities might only happen for a month or two at a time during the school year, but we want to stay with them for the entire school year. And we bring in women who are working in STEM professions, and we meet twice a month, and we have them share about their career. What is their story? How did they navigate their education? How are they navigating their career? What do they do day in and day out at their job? What have been their challenges, their successes? What kind of inspirational insight can they give these young girls? And so we bring these role models that are in our own community, and we shine a spotlight on them so that it isn't so strange to see a woman who is a software engineer or an aerospace engineer or doing research science. So we want to bring them in and have in-person interaction with these professionals. And from there, we want to also then take these girls out into the community. So we provide field trips. So we've gone to Google and Comcast. We've gone to doctors' offices in the community. We've gone to construction sites. So we try to get them into the community to take that sneak peek behind the curtain so they can really see what it means to be a bioengineer or, work in tech at Google. So just really help them see and visualize what it is that they could do and build their confidence. And as we start to do this, they grow their network with professionals and their like-minded peers, but it gives them the chance to say, hey, I think I might want to go into meteorology. I'd really like to be set up with a job shadow with someone in meteorology and see what that's all about. They can have mentorship opportunities for their senior projects or other projects they're working on. But it's all about helping them build their network and to really build their confidence.
Yeah. It's a pretty robust program. That's pretty cool, and pretty well thought out. And I think you, having lived that life of that STEM career individual, like, you can really kind of pave that path for what the program should look like in a really cool way.
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting how you as a woman have gone to Google and all these big companies now and said, hey, we're going to come blast your doors down with a bunch of girls in high school and like just change this from the inside out. So I guess, part of the, big change piece that you guys are looking at is you're building relationships with these corporations. I mean, Lockheed Martin, Google, all these huge organizations, and you're convincing their leadership, which oftentimes is predominantly male. You are a female kind of knocking on the door, convincing leadership that's predominantly male, to care about this as an issue. And then somehow you're doing that in such a good way that they're not only inviting you guys in, but funding it. So I guess talk to me about like just the average company today. I mean, not the company who's, obviously doesn't support what you guys are talking about, but what is it that these companies are noticing? Because we're all about on this podcast, right? Where mission and profit collide. And there's a unique story here for you guys where an organization, when they diversify their workforce in unique ways and bring in people who think differently, they become more profitable as a result of doing the right thing. And I think that's almost as impactful as a social enterprise as any other social enterprise model. So I guess talk to me about those conversations with high level C-suite leaders and what that part's looked like for you.
Sure. That's one thing is so cool about the work that we're doing. Even though we're a nonprofit, we're able to gain the support of some of these really amazing companies, like you said, Lockheed Martin, Viasat, some of these great companies that, they're listening because they have this industry, they have this work that they need to accomplish, and they don't have enough people to fill the jobs. They're advancing, technology is advancing, space travel is advancing. How can they accomplish what it is that they're trying to do without enough qualified employees to carry that forward? And so, to your point, it's, how do we work together, and why are they listening? It's because they want to invest in a program and in the future. It's one of our companies that has supported us with not only volunteers, but funding is Core Consultants. And they know it's an investment. It's not going to turn around in 1 to 2 year return, but that by investing in this program now, that they'll have employees come work with them in 4 to 8 years when these girls have gone through high school and then through their higher education. And they want to make that investment. It is truly an investment into a more diverse employee, pool. And when you have diversity in thought, when you have women, when you have, people of different color, people who have had different experiences in their life, they can bring so many more different ideas to a table to solve a problem than if everyone has had the same experiences, the same, is from the same place. It's really hard to solve a problem faster and better quality if you don't have diversity in your thinking. So it really is working together. And you mentioned our alumni. What's really great is, we want our student, the girls that we work with, once they graduate high school and they become part of our alumni program, is helping them find those internships and start really getting their foot in the door and moving into that career.
Yeah. And I love that. And you kind of touched on this, but maybe this is a different way to ask a similar question. Like you were talking about them, it's a recruitment model. Like these companies thinking 5-10 years down the line, they can invest in individuals in high school and college now, and then they're going to be great employees that potentially want to come work for them in the future and be loyal employees, which is a really challenging thing to find in today's talent market. They could do that they could go to a job fair and get, women, men, girls, boys, everybody to kind of come in. What what is the specific advantage? And I'm almost asking you, it's a weird question because I'm asking you kind of defend the reason for wanting women in there. You talked about a diverse workforce and thinking about ideas differently, but from a STEM perspective, I worked with an organization that helped blind people get employed with Fortune 1000 companies at one point. We talked about their unique ability to listen and hear things and listen to people and how that gave them like a superpower on the job. What are some of those characteristics that you guys have seen in talking to these leaders and seeing girls tackle these kinds of STEM problems that are just different than maybe males might tackle them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And having been a woman in STEM myself, I can tell you from my own personal experience that there's definitely a difference between the way men approach a problem and women approach a problem. And neither one is better than the other. It's just totally a difference. And, a lot of times women, they can be more detail oriented. So being able to, think about the small details along the way with the bigger picture in mind is really helpful. A lot of times we have a different way of communicating. So some clients might be able to communicate, and it's okay if it's an all male team, but a lot of times, clients are men and women. So being able to have that ability to communicate and to hear the entire story and hear all the information, it's going to help the product overall, the project success. I was working on a project one time here in Colorado. I was working on a building on a campus. I won't say where it was, but I remember at the end of the meeting, I was sitting there with my colleague and we had a conversation. We're sitting across from the client and they kept asking the same question over and over. And the answer given was the same over and over. And finally, I jumped in and said, I hear this is what you're saying. Here's how we're going to address it. I knew that my colleague was already going to do that, but it wasn't being said. And so that put them at ease, like, okay, they're hearing what I'm saying. So that communication piece, attention to detail, it just complements the entire project. So I think it's really important to have both men and women working on projects, especially when it comes to problem solving in the STEM industry. Diversity is huge too, because those different perspectives can really help solve a problem faster and bring more creativity.
Yeah, totally. No, it's super. Thank you for that answer. I know it's almost like asking you to defend why women are a good option in the workforce, but I think that's part of what you guys are doing every day. And I think really impactful. All right, everyone, I want to take a quick break from today's episode and just share a little bit about Impact Foundation, who's got an incredibly awesome model of using impact investment, charitable dollars, and funding tons of projects all over the world right now. What if your investments could change the world? At Impact Foundation, they believe business with purpose has the power to transform society. Purpose-built for impact investing, Impact Foundation provides a streamlined way to fund businesses that seek social and spiritual transformation or make loans to charity, all while earning a financial return to grow your giving. Donors and investors have already supported more than 200 redemptive enterprises through their impact accounts. They provide needed fuel for companies that exist as a force of God's redemptive work in the world. To learn more about what they're doing in their Kingdom Impact Investing model, visit impactfoundation.org. I want to move into the corporate donor piece, but one other question, talk to me about what are you seeing, when you guys as an organization are working with girls, middle school and high school, what are some of the limiting beliefs or things that they're feeling as it relates to moving into this kind of career that you guys are able to overcome through working with them?
Sure. That's a really great question. And it's interesting working with girls. I see exactly what I experienced at that same age, which was a lack of confidence, because as women, we tend to, and I'm sure your audience has probably heard this a million times, but we want to know that we're going to nail it and be perfect at something before we jump in and start working on it. Whereas men are like, let's just jump in. We'll figure it out as we go. And so a lot of times it's lack of confidence and just mindset that they have the ability to think in a different way. It's how you approach. It's your mindset on how you can approach something. And it does take a different kind of training of the mind. I remember when I was in high school and then I went on to college, and being in some of those engineering classes, it's like, oh my gosh, like, how am I ever going to solve this problem? And you have to really train your mind to go, okay, well, what if I tried to solve it this way or do this? And it's just all about mindset and building that confidence. That's what tends to hold them back. And what I love about our program is that by showing them different places of employment and different STEM companies, and hearing the words that maybe they haven't heard before, and understanding that other women are doing this, it really gives them that sense of, okay, this is something I can do, and I can visualize myself, doing the same thing. And it's just such a confidence builder. And that's where I think where women tend to hold themselves back, is that whole mindset piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is huge. And I think the way you guys bring in through the podcast and the field trips and bring in women leaders in those careers, like, helps change that confidence thing and helps them even visualize and make it more of a reality, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And pretty awesome. So shifting gears a little bit, then the other piece that I thought was really interesting with having you guys on, because, and I keep saying that as in, normally we have the organizations that we're having on or talking to, either they're impact investors or they've got closer to like a 50-50 split of earned income to traditional fundraising dollars. You guys obviously have a very low amount of earned income, but like 80-something% of your fundraising comes from corporate donors, and that's not normal. And not normal for a nonprofit that's traditionally fundraising all their income. But I think it's a cool angle of where the business profit world is thinking missionally, and you're almost connecting a dot for them to do that in a way that's, mutually beneficial all around for everybody. So I guess give me just a quick overview of how you guys have stumbled into that as an option, because obviously you're wanting to partner with these organizations, but when did you start to make the realization, or when did they start to say, hey, we also want to financially support you guys to do that, and what the path's been to corporate foundations and those kinds of things?
Right. Well, as much as anyone, Ryan, that it's kind of interesting getting to that point, figuring out like, oh, we're not a traditional nonprofit. We definitely have a different kind of model here. And working with these different companies and these partners, it is definitely a mutually beneficial relationship. And I just think it's pretty incredible, because a lot of times, a nonprofit will ask for funding to carry out their mission. And maybe you get to, get a glimpse into what that's looking like, and you get reporting on how it's progressing, and it's a feel good thing. But not only can companies do that and support us that way, we also provide that ability for volunteers of their own employees to come volunteer as guest speakers, hosting field trips, supporting our events, coming on the podcast, providing mentorship opportunities for the girls that we work with. It's pretty incredible. And it's such a great way for companies to be able to fund us, but I go back to, it's mutually beneficial, because they get to plant the seed, they get to introduce themselves to these young ladies, and they get to help start getting them thinking and shaping their path into what their industry is all about and coming to work for them.
Well, I think you touch on a key point that we've coached a lot of clients on in the past when they're going after corporate relationships, is really to share the model and the mission with them and build a relationship, and then kind of put the ball in their court and say, okay, look, here's 2 or 3 ways you can partner. Which one fits you best? You guys can volunteer. You can host a career day. You can host a field trip. You can come to our golf tournament. You can sponsor this event. You can financially give. Obviously, all that stuff sounds great, but you guys need income to function. So it's always interesting asking for money in that sense. But a lot of corporations are recognizing the need to, they're developing this kind of corporate social responsibility, CSR, foundations, those kinds of things to do that. And so they're set up for that, that side of it. So I think you guys have kind of nailed it on that front where you walk in and say, hey, look, here's all these opportunities to partner financially is one of them. What do we want to do there? Wendy, what would you say has been the average sales cycle for a corporate donor from the moment you meet them to the moment they give a significant amount, maybe $2,500 or $5,000 or more? Is obviously some of the, you might have a 12-month year period between meeting them and when they write that check, but you've done other things in the meantime. So I don't know, what would you say is kind of that average timeline before they're financially giving? Yeah,
I'm trying to think.
You can ballpark it.
I'll definitely ballpark it. Yeah, I would say, everyone wants to know and trust what you're doing before they write a check. It is very rare that anyone would just say, okay, here's your check for $10,000. Go do great work. We'll figure this out later. So,
which is very different than your traditional like major donor or grant like foundation. Cause a lot of times those ones are just like, hey, here's a check. Like you matched our grant application. Good job. Like there's less due diligence, but dealing with business people, it would make sense. Yeah. That they're like, hey, we're not just going to throw money around. You need to prove yourself.
Right. Exactly. So we don't, we're a nonprofit. We don't have a product. We want to make a difference with them. So building that relationship and that partnership starts with getting to know us, knowing us and trusting us. And typically, we start that with volunteer opportunities. And once we engage with them as a volunteer, attending events, and then ultimately forming that partnership with them. And I would say that could take, we work throughout the school year. That could take, 6 months to 9 months, and maybe even a year, depending on how that, that relationship is going and how much engagement they have and getting to know us. But I would say between 6 months to a year is usually the sales cycle. I will say once they do know us and they do have that relationship with us, we typically keep them as a partner year after year. Whereas if we have a company who we have received grants from companies where we've tried to engage their employees, and it just hasn't been successful. We met their requirements. They gave us the money. I don't think they were necessarily expecting to have that opportunity. And we don't see the funding renew because it's like, oh, we gave you the money this year. Now we're going to go look for a different organization that meets the requirements and give them the money and kind of spread it around. But the ones that we do build the relationships with will stay with us and work with us and fund us year over year.
Yeah, that was another thing I was going to bring up is you guys have kind of struck the iron like in an interesting way where you have corporate partners renewing year after year. What has been part of that success for you guys? I mean, obviously some drop off or different things happen, but a lot of yours have consistently given in different ways. And that's not abnormal for a nonprofit or any organization in that sense, but it is an interesting success point from the corporate side for you guys. So what do you think you guys have done that's uniquely helped that?
I think being transparent about what it is that we're doing and staying in contact and trying to understand what it is that is important to them and what their needs are as a company. What is important for them when they are looking to do community outreach and give back to the community, being able to have a more, I don't know, I want to say, a closer relationship, understanding them in a way that, you have to take the time to meet with them on an annual basis and touch base, and really catering the information that you give back and that you take and incorporate, just understanding them as an organization and making sure that their needs are being met.
It's really approaching them like a client. I mean, everything you're saying is typical for-profit business development, sales kind of philosophy, like just how to take care of a customer, a client, and you guys are treating it that way. You've got to do that with major donors and in a traditional nonprofit fundraising standpoint. But I think because of how, corporate minded in the business world operates, like you're just reflecting what they know as good customer service, and they appreciate that. They're the ones giving, but you're treating them as if they're a customer. And I think that's an interesting win on that front. Outside of what you shared so far, like if an organization's listening to this, and maybe this can be a good way for us to wrap things up. Like if an organization's listening to this, like, wow, this is really unique. I kind of want to go after some corporate donors and stuff. What, outside of what you shared so far, what would be your biggest other piece of advice or insight for people kind of starting to develop that side of their organization from a fundraising standpoint?
Yeah. Gosh, I would say, get your employees involved. I think it's really important when the mission of the community outreach for a company and the nonprofit that you want to partner with align, and getting that buy-in from employees. And it's not just, let's write the check and show up to a couple of events, but really engaging your employees and working together, I think is a piece of advice I would give. Just really knowing who it is that you're supporting, and, what does it mean? What is that investment going to return? And I really think that with STEMblazers, it can be very tangible, because these girls are going to start moving into internships and moving up into the pipeline. And, that relationship is going to continue to grow and nurture, because they will start seeing employees come into their workforce.
Yeah. It's really, to kind of phrase that a different way, it's saying, what unique challenge is the business world in this vertical or this industry or whatever you're going after or relate to? What specific challenge are they experiencing, and how do we actually mutually support each other? Like they can support us to do our mission because they're not good at that. They're not going to go start middle school and high school after school programming, but they need that because they're struggling with talent acquisition. And so really it's everybody's winning and we're all solving this problem together. And when that's the case, like you're almost an extension of what their HR talent recruitment organization could be. And so I think every nonprofit or every missional based organization, even social enterprises and stuff, like they can, think through, okay, what industry types of corporations would be a good fit, and what problem or challenge are they experiencing that we actually help solve? And I think that's a really unique way to think about this stuff. That's pretty cool and impactful. So as we kind of tie up, Wendy, like how do, if people want to learn more about STEMblazers, if they want to get involved in some way, do you guys have any events coming up? I mean, obviously people all over the world listen to our podcast, but you guys are based in Denver. But yeah, how do people get more involved or get more information and stuff like that?
So for those in the audience that would like to learn more about us, you could go to our website at STEMblazers.org. You can also find us on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Our handle's STEMblazers. And, you can always reach out to us through those channels. And, I'm really excited. We have an event coming up here at the end of October, our annual Mocktail Social. And this is a great way if you want to learn what STEMblazers is all about and come see for yourself. It's an evening where we bring professional women in STEM together with high school students that we work with. In addition to, we invite the entire community. So it's a community event, and also students in college. And it's a night of inspiration where we get to hear from incredible speakers. We also network. It's fun. It's social. It's it's just kind of like STEMblazers in one night in a 3-hour experience. It's a great way to check us out. And it's also a great event for professionals to have conversations with students and make an impact, because you never know what's going to happen with one conversation. And it's a great way for students to, grow their network and be inspired. And you never know, maybe something will come from it, an internship or scholarships or some other opportunity. So I would encourage those who are in the Denver area to check that out. You can find more information on our website about that as well.
Awesome. And you guys have the podcast as well, so people can check out the podcast and everything going on that.
Yes. So for everyone outside of Denver, that was the whole reason the podcast was invented, was to be able to have a STEMblazers experience and be inspired by women in STEM, no matter where you are in this world. So we have alumni that host a 10 to 12 series season, and they bring on guests, women working in STEM, who share their story, and they get to ask them all sorts of questions, and it's really empowering. And there's a lot of diversity included in that. We try to highlight women of color as much as possible, because we want all girls to be able to have that opportunity to visualize themselves in a career in STEM. So that's a great way to engage with us.
Cool. And we'll drop all the links for STEMblazers in there. Well, yeah, Wendy, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Really love what you guys are doing. Stoked to be a part of it. And it's cool to see some unique ways that the business world's overlapping with everything you guys are doing. So thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyways, everyone, thanks so much to Wendy and the team at STEMblazers for all the awesome work they're doing. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the podcast. And from my side, like, a big takeaway is, like, if you're on that side of the coin and you're sitting in your corporate job today, like, there's tons of opportunities for you to have an impact. You can champion an organization like STEMblazers or whatever that might be. You can be kind of a light in that corporate world. There's a lot of profit, a lot of money, a lot of opportunity for donations to go to organizations like STEMblazers doing this within your organization. And so if your corporation or your business doesn't have a corporate social responsibility side or a foundation, like, are you kind of being called to start that up? We did a podcast episode almost a year ago on, like, how to get involved in social enterprise today. So I just hope this is an inspiring episode. Maybe you're not involved in STEM, but you have some industry that you can have an impact in that way. And I think there's a ton of good that can be done as it relates to redeeming the global economy for social good in that sense. So really excited about that stuff. And we've got some awesome episodes coming up as we continue in on season 3. And yeah, stoked you guys are listening. Definitely hit that like, subscribe button, and all the stuff that you guys want to do on your podcast apps and all that. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all those things to catch up on the latest episodes. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for listening.